What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Grid Encore. I'm your host, Ben Schneider. Brandon Crossland is off tonight, but filling in for him once again, Tanner Smith from Pitbox Press. Tanner, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, Ben. How about you?
I'm hanging in there. Honestly, I've been telling people, and I'll get into this once we finish the intro here, but probably one of the best weeks I've had, just mentally and emotionally, in quite some time. So I've been thankful for that. I've got a busy week coming up, and just trying to get ready for my sister's wedding and everything. So, it's been challenging for the last couple of weeks here. We've been getting ready for a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but it was a good week, and certainly no shortage of things to talk about here on tonight's show. So I'm looking forward to getting into that conversation here. But before we do that, as always, I just want to give a quick shout out to our Patreon supporters, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Thank you so much for continuing to support the Grid Network. Your support has helped us continue to grow what we're trying to build here with this motorsport media outlet. And speaking of that, make sure you visit our newly relaunched, website at gridnetworktv.com. Kobe Lambeth and the rest of our team have been working really hard behind the scenes to get that up and running. And we're promoting one new part of the site per day all throughout this week as we continue to build upon that. Of course, the grid ranking for 2025 week one will be out this upcoming weekend. So stay tuned for that launch. But the website launch has gone live as of this morning. And we'll be highlighting that on our socials all throughout the week as we draw closer to the weekend here. So make sure you all check that out as well. And again, the 6 individuals you see on your screen here, they've played no small role in helping us get that done. So thank you to them. If you like what you see tonight, you can consider visiting the link in the description box below to join them on Patreon. Or if you'd rather make a one-time contribution to us instead, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link also in the description box below, or tip us on YouTube through the Super Chat feature as well. Now, just on a personal note, before we get started tonight, before we get into it, and given our conversation on Saturday night in the Slack chat, Tanner, we may get into it on this episode here. Lots to obviously cover with the Xfinity Series, and no shortage of controversy coming out of that finish. But before that, just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I am so touched and have been so thankful for everybody that's reached out after last week's show. If you missed last week's show, I basically just, in my final thoughts, took a moment to open up and be vulnerable with my mental health situation and the emotions that I've been going through the last couple of months in particular here to start 2025. And just like I said, been overwhelmed by the support and the number of people that have reached out, both in my professional life here on this show and at the Grid Network team, and also just in my personal life. Lots of people checking in on me, making sure I was doing okay. I think I've bought into this negative mindset and stigma for a while that, you're supposed to be tough, you're supposed to be a man and not necessarily show your emotions. But it just got to the point where I kind of just needed to ask for help and reach out to my friends and let them know that I've been fighting some demons and going through some things. And like I said, cannot thank each and every one of you enough for the support that you've shown me and the support that you've shown this show. And like I said, I know Brandon's off tonight. He and his wife are in South Carolina, but he should be back next week. I'm going to be out of commission here at the back end of this week because, like I said on last week's show, my sister's getting married, and we're looking forward to celebrating with her and my soon-to-be brother-in-law as well. And, once we get through that, we're going to be back and better than ever next week and going to continue to kill it the rest of the year. And it's not just Brandon, but it's guys like you, Tanner, and Matthew Bro has been on the show this year as well. Joshua Birch helping us with our open wheel coverage. It's a whole team that works together. Joe Samaniego, of course, behind the scenes, getting our graphics and everything ready for these shows. Thank you all so much for everything that you've given me, the opportunities that you've given me, and the support that you've shown to me over the last week in particular. So with that, let's get into it here with the Xfinity Series. And I'll go ahead and pull up the results here. Obviously, those are the truck results. Here we go. The Xfinity Series. We'll get into the winner, Austin Hill, here in just a moment, but I think we have to start with the final lap, maybe the final laps, I should say, kind of what led up to this situation here. Sammy Smith, from multiple car lengths back, I would say, really reminiscent of the move that Austin Dillon pulled on Joey Logano, just absolutely dive bombed it into turn 3, hit the back end of Taylor Gray. Taylor Gray spun out, got relegated to, I believe, 29th place, if I recall correctly. Yeah, there you go. So he thought he was set to win the race, or probably at worst finish second or third. But instead of a bump and run, it looked like it ended up being a dump and run, regardless of whatever intentions Sammy Smith had. Certainly took it a little too far in the eyes of a lot of people, and also in the eyes of the CW booth. And I think, Tanner, so I was referencing the conversation that we were having in our Slack chat on Saturday night. We'll start with this here. You and I, obviously looked at the Phoenix incident and looked at this incident. You saw the CW booth, I think, as being a little bit hypocritical, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here with how you saw it. But of course, the CW booth kind of called the Phoenix incident clean. Alex Bowman still came across the line in second, certainly got used up. But looking at the chaos of what we saw Saturday night, they had no problem calling that out. Do you see that as hypocritical here? And then just generally speaking, what were your thoughts on the incident that we saw, incidents, I guess I should say, on the final lap on Saturday night?
Well, first of all, I'd like to clarify that what Sammy Smith pulled was more of a dump and fall than a dump and run, because if you dump and run, the point is for you to go and win. And he did not, in fact, go on to do that. So just wanted to make sure that's clear. As for the Phoenix incident and kind of how it relates to what we saw on Saturday night in the Xfinity Series race, Eric Almirola at Phoenix completely wiped out Alex Bowman coming to the finish line and junked his car in a pursuit to win. And to Almirola's credit, he did end up winning that race, and perhaps that was worth it for him. I didn't really see it as a very honorable move as a race car driver, we'll say, but it's NASCAR, we invite contact, yada, yada, yada. As far as Saturday is concerned, I think Mike Joy put it best that it would be detrimental to dumpster fires everywhere if we called what happened Saturday night a dumpster fire, because dumpster fires are contained. And I definitely agree with him there. So to kind of give a brief recap of what happened, in one of the late restarts, Sammy Smith got into Taylor Gray going into turn one at Martinsville, something we've seen probably throughout the entire history of that track, dating back to the 1940s. Someone dove into a corner and moved someone out of the way. Smith took the lead, then coming back to the white, another caution came out, forcing overtime. Well, Gray lined up right behind Smith, and sure enough, on the ensuing restart, he moved Sammy up the track. They were even and square. They raced through 3 and 4 without making any sort of contact, as they were still side by side. Then they went back into turn 1, and Gray washed up to about half of a groove away from going into the asphalt portion of the turns at Martinsville, moved Sammy up the track physically, got him side by side with Allgaier going down the back stretch, and then Sammy completely sends it into turn 3, through the 54's bumper, spinning the 54 out, and caving in the front of his Pilot number 8 Chevy. From there, bedlam, just absolute heck, breaks loose. And Sammy does not end up winning after pulling a very desperate and very robust move, we'll say, and triggers in some way a massive pileup, very reminiscent of 2017 Martinsville in the fall, when Denny Hamlin decided to wreck everybody coming to the finish line. Now, here's my view of events. I think that anybody calling for a suspension for Sammy Smith is silly. Like, I'm just going to go ahead and say that right off the rip. I feel that we have seen this exact move happen 3 different times at Martinsville in the past, and I can pinpoint each of them. 2017 with Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott. And Denny even referenced this on his podcast, and still, for whatever reason, he seems to maintain that that wasn't a purposeful move to have taken Elliott out. And I mean, maybe it wasn't, but you certainly didn't care about wiping him out, which is just as bad. Number 2, Ty Gibbs, 2022 Fall Xfinity Series race, going into turn 1, just completely cleaned out Brandon Jones, even admitted it over the radio that he didn't intend to make the corner. NASCAR does nothing. He still gets his championship berth and goes on to win the title. Third time, Austin Hill, the very next year in the Xfinity Series, just completely dives into turn 3, very reminiscent to Sammy Smith, and hits Sheldon Creed, his teammate, so hard that it breaks his bumper bar and causes a very similar pileup to what we saw on Saturday night. And guess what? Still no penalties levied for anything that happened that night. So I think if we're going to go on precedent here, even penalizing Sammy, I guess, is a little extreme, but I would agree with it. I think that for a move like that, we have got to start policing what is happening on the track. And this could be a good place to start, even though it does feel like you're singling out a guy for something that has been clearly established by the series and the sanctioning body as an acceptable move in those situations. And if you even look back at the Austin Dillon Logano Hamlin incident from last year at Richmond, it was pretty clear that Dillon was penalized more so for the addition of the right rear hook to Denny Hamlin more so than he was for the cleaning out of Logano going into turn 3. So take all of that, mash it together, and here's where I have a problem with Parker Kligerman and Jamie McMurray. They had the audacity to call Alex Bowman getting shoved all the way to Tucson a completely clean move. Those are their words. A totally clean maneuver in order to get the victory. They called that way, but they raked Sammy Smith over the coals. And what I have a problem with is, sure, you could consider this instance a course correction based on the Phoenix reaction. I don't see it that way. I see it as this being a bit of a inconsistency or a hypocrisy at the worst. Because how could you see a guy junk another car the way that Eric Almirola did by just completely crushing both sides of the 17 car at Phoenix, and then you see what essentially started as only a lazy spin for Taylor Gray off of the front of Sammy Smith's car, and you call this like the worst thing you've ever seen when we saw the worst thing we've ever seen. It happened last year at Richmond, and I hope it never gets that bad again. Now, I get that what Sammy did was bad, and I don't disagree with anybody that wants to call that out, but when you're calling what Eric Almirola did completely clean, and then you're raking someone who basically just spun one guy out and he didn't even make contact with the wall, when you're calling that like one of the dirtiest moves you've ever seen, it leads people in the audience to believe that there is a bit of an incongruity in terms of what these two incidents represent. And I don't really feel that way. I feel like any contact where you are deliberately wrecking the opponent in order to win is Bush League and should not be, recognized with any sort of cleanliness attached to it. And for Almirola's incident to be categorized differently than Sammy Smith's, I just feel like that's a complete false equivalency. And at the end of the day, I just feel like this is more of a result of Kligerman and McMurray not really being as booth friendly, as experienced in the booth, that they're going to make these kinds of mistakes early on, and they'll probably hammer out more so what their booth ethical code is going to look like as time goes on. This is only race 7. So yeah, I know this is an extremely long-winded answer, but
please go.
I just like, I can't keep seeing these things from our booths where we have these former drivers in there that don't know how to call things. And it's starting to get a little bit out of hand on their end for me. But before I continue any further, I would like to hear what you have to say after hearing that mountain of evidence I just gave.
Sure. Well, there are two ways I will try to maybe not defend, but give a little grace to Parker and Jamie Mack here. Number one, I don't think two wrongs make a right. I would rather, I get there's the idea of consistency, but just because they called what I viewed to be a not so clean move at Phoenix, just because they called that clean, I wouldn't want them to also turn around and, for consistency purposes, call what I think was a not very clean move Saturday night, a clean move just to be able to check the consistency box. At the very least, I think we can applaud them for calling this one out. We could say maybe it's inconsistent or it's hypocritical with what they did a few weeks back at Phoenix, but I think when you look at the mountain of evidence, as you so put it, to what we saw Saturday night, I think it's pretty clear, but that's not what we want to see. And I'll give credit to the booth where it's due for calling it out, even if I thought they came up a little bit short 3 weeks ago. But I will also say that being number one. Number two is, as much as, and I say this all the time on this show, as much as I may disagree with a stance that somebody's taking, I at least try to open my mind up and understand how a reasonable and sensible person could come to that conclusion. I may very strongly disagree with their conclusion, but I can look at the mountain of evidence that we have and see, okay, what are they seeing in this that leads them to believe what they're saying here? And again, I'm well aware, you have articulated perfectly several times, Alex Bowman got used up. I mean, both sides of that car. If that race had been one lap longer, there's no way he would have been able to continue it. Certainly not at the pace that he was running at to contend for the win. Maybe not even at all. The reality is, it was a one-time move. Almirola moved up the track, put him in the wall. Both cars stayed straight. Bowman still came across the line in second. At least Almirola won the race. In this particular incident on Saturday night, it started much further back going into turn 3 with still almost half a lap to go. Sammy Smith ended up turning the leader around. I know that, as you perfectly mentioned Saturday night, not too much damage to the 54 car, but when you dump the leader with the entire pack still coming, it leads for the possibility for more cars to get swept up in that. The leader got spun around, and then that wasn't the end of it, because Sammy Smith got out of shape. And once you see a move like that, I think drivers, subconsciously get in their mind that anything beyond that is fair game. And I think you saw that with the resulting carnage that we saw on the front stretch, which wiped out a good half dozen cars at least and left basically a roadblock on the start-finish line on the last lap. So again, I think neither move was clean. Obviously, I have problems with what Almirola did. I certainly have problems with what Sammy Smith did Saturday night. But I can understand where somebody could look at. I'm not saying I can understand where they could call it completely clean, but I can understand, and I think I might even agree with them, that what I saw Saturday night at Martinsville left an even more sour taste in my mouth because of how many cars got caught up in it and because of how long the incident dragged on, basically for the entire last half lap. And as I saw a clip of Mark Martin on a Door Bumper Clear before we came onto the show here tonight, at least Almirola won the race. Sammy Smith couldn't even do that, got well out of shape, and then was part of the carnage as they were all coming to the line there, and ended up barely hanging on to the top 10, as you can see on the results to the side of us here. So
even let Chris Wright get into the top 10 because
yeah.
of the,
Yeah, I mean, and Brennan Poole up in fourth. I mean, you see Dean Thompson in sixth, some names that you're not too used to seeing up there in the top 10 in this series. So it was complete carnage and complete calamity. And so, again, I don't know that it's necessarily a defense of what we saw at Phoenix. I'm just saying I can certainly understand where, Parker or Jamie Mack, and I'm not in their minds. I don't know exactly, 100% of what their take on each of these two incidents are beyond what they articulated in the booth. But I can understand where they would look at it Saturday night and say that we don't want to see that in our sport. I think that was the general sentiment across the board if you looked at social media. And I thought it was quite ironic, as I said, on Twitter myself, quoting Dale Jr.'s tweet. Jr. was saying, even before any of this happened, the history that this track has and the prestige of winning a grandfather clock, the track deserves better than this. And then I quoted his tweet and said, the number font that this man worked so hard, fought so hard to bring back, made so famous, deserves better than what Sammy Smith just provided us on the last lap there. So that's all I can really say on that. I understand what you're saying about it being a little bit inconsistent, but I would rather the booth turn around and get it right the second time than say, well, we called Phoenix clean, so we have to call Martinsville clean. I think these are two separate incidents, and I can understand where you wouldn't view them as apples to apples necessarily.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like the thing that troubles me the most about this is when you call something like Almirola's finish clean, it's almost like a get out of jail free card for anybody to do anything on the final lap. At least that's how it feels to me. I mean, obviously, I don't know how much these Xfinity guys go back and watch the broadcasts and pay attention to what the announcers say, but it definitely gives the fans the impression that things like this are completely, they should be a green light instead of a red light. And I don't like that. I don't like when the fans are kind of given mixed messaging. It seemed like when Almirola did what he did, it was basically giving, the fans the impression that, well, it's gloves off on the final lap. Do whatever you got to do to get to the finish line first. And that is essentially what they were saying, continuing to double down on it in Phoenix. And then when somebody does take their gloves completely off and lays everything out on the line and throws the kitchen sink in there, that's when they had a problem. It comes off wrong to me. And I just feel like if they can go back to Phoenix and right their wrongs there as far as like what they said, it would have at least left a better impression for me going into the following week, and then obviously now into this race, where their stance seems to have changed on the final lap. It seems like I feel like that would have been a better path going forward. And unfortunately, that's not what we got. Now, the fans probably don't really know what is and what isn't off limits on the last lap, because if what Almirola did is completely clean, how is what Sammy Smith did that much more wrong, that it is so, so grossly maligned like it has been the past 48 hours.
Sure. Well, I mean, and to that, I would say just kind of welcome to NASCAR, where we're consistently inconsistent on a whole multitude of issues, and that's the way that it's been for many, many years now. So, sadly. Again, I mean, I can certainly, again, I can understand where you don't want to be. You want to make sure you're calling it out in all instances. And I also think, we can, I don't know if this really come up in the conversation, but Almirola is a veteran. I mean, he has enough experience that maybe you should say he should know better. He should be teaching the young drivers to race with a little bit more respect out there. Whereas Sammy Smith, not to defend him necessarily, but is a much younger driver, still trying to earn his wings, so to speak, in the Xfinity Series before he has any ambitions to move up to Cup. And I think, as we saw this weekend, certainly has a long way to go. Before we move on here, because we should talk about the race winner and what came out of all this carnage here. You kind of touched on it with saying, I think a suspension or even a penalty in some respects would be, again, inconsistent with what NASCAR's let go in the past here, particularly at this track. But in light of two wrongs not making a right, so to speak, do you think NASCAR should start stepping in? Should this be the moment, maybe much like what Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson, that deal at Las Vegas was with the right rear hooks, at least until Austin Dillon did it last year? Is this something that should set a precedent for the future? Should we have stricter penalties if you just clean out the leader on the last lap and cost, what was it? I guess 28 positions for Taylor Gray.
Okay, well, let me ask you this before we go any further with this question. Are you asking me what I think I would do in this position if I was NASCAR, or are we asking what NASCAR is going to do? Because those are two completely different questions. I would,
if you were in charge, if you were the commissioner, okay. That may or may not be
we'll get into that.
into what's coming up here in the open segment. If you were king for a day, as Ricky Craven said after the Martinsville insanity last year, if you were king for a day, you could make the decision for NASCAR on their behalf. What would you do regarding penalties for Sammy Smith or anybody involved in the last lap carnage?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be waiting until the middle of the year to set an ethical code, which NASCAR is just so curiously afraid to do. But if hypothetically I'm taking the reins today, here's what I would do. I would give Sammy Smith a 20-point penalty for his involvement in this, purely for driver points. I don't think the owner needs to be held accountable for this action. I think that'd be a little extreme, plus a $50,000 fine. And I would explain to everybody that the slate is wiped clean going forward, but if you wipe out the leader on the final lap in a deliberate attempt to manufacture an outcome, which is essentially what it is, it's manufacturing an outcome by wrecking the leader, that you will be sent to the last car on the lead lap as a result. You will get the black flag as you cross the finish line, and whoever takes second wins the race. And I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than that. However, if I'm going off of what I think NASCAR is going to do going forward this week, I think they're going to not penalize him, wipe the slate clean, and then continue to reinforce that there's gray areas in this, and you all are subject to whatever our whims, produce. So, if it were me, a mild penalty, all things considered at this point in the season for Sammy. I think that what he did was a little much and a bit gratuitous, a bit robust, as I mentioned before. But again, it's not really anything we haven't seen before, even out of guys at the cup level at this track. And for me, it's really hard to really give him a stiff punishment given what the precedent has been at this specific facility, even for this specific series.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And I think that to the point you were making about Denny Hamlin, I know Denny went on his podcast today and called out not just Sammy Smith, but also Austin Hill. And I think Mayer was the third driver that he mentioned by name here and basically said they all drove like a-holes, on that last lap there. And then, of course, people could bring up 2017. Denny may be a hypocrite. I don't think he's necessarily wrong, though. I think that this has been an issue, not just in the Xfinity Series, but also clearly in Cup. And then, kind of to the point about, because people were saying, maybe, Taylor Gray had moved Sammy Smith up the track. I think a more extreme example of that is everybody remembers Denny dumping Chase Elliott. I think people forget, and all they have to do is just go back and play the radioactive from Fall Martinsville 2017. Chase Elliott drove Brad Keselowski up multiple lanes, and Keselowski was on the radio screaming, is this what we call racing here? But nobody seems to remember that part of the equation because Keselowski ultimately didn't get completely dumped. Elliott obviously got spun out, and Hamlin didn't even go on to win the race that time either. So there's a lot of layers to these situations and multiple examples. Again, it's hard to make complete apples-to-apples comparisons, but I do think that just making it a gray area and not having any sort of incident, where NASCAR can step in, I think, leads to the idea of this could happen again in the future.
I am so glad you brought up that Brad said that on the radio right before that incident happened, because what happened right before this incident this weekend? A driver got shoved up several grooves when they were, in my opinion, even after both shipping each other into turn one on the restart. It's so funny how this sport, for as much as it goes in circles, it just cycles and repeats itself. Yeah. And how soon we forget little minute details of what happened in 2017 that sparked such outrage at the time. How soon we forget those minute details when they represent themselves in the modern day. So I don't know. I find that a little interesting. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, and I mean it's tough. It's admittedly tough because when you put 38 cars on a half-mile track, you're gonna have contact. And I think
Yes.
Bump and runs to a degree are part of, as you mentioned, Martinsville lore and short track lore and NASCAR lore. The question then becomes, where do we draw the line? What is a bump and run versus a dump and run versus a dump and falling back 10 spots because you couldn't even win the race because you overdrove the corner so much that you not only cleaned the guy out, but you cleaned the guy out and still didn't make it, even using the leader as a break there. I think there's, again, just the longer you let this continue to boil over and incidents like this happen, I think it exponentially increases, especially with all the young kids watching that are, now, the guys that were kids when Denny Hamlin did that to Chase Elliott are now racing here in the Xfinity Series 8 years later. And they see that happen even at the Cup level. And they think, well, at worst, maybe I'll be fined or put on probation or something. So if it means I can win the race instead of finishing second, maybe it's worth it. I don't know. I just think that's a dangerous road to go down and precedent to set. But again, we've talked so much on this program, about consistent inconsistency, that I'm with you. I think NASCAR probably should step in and give some sort of penalty or reprimand to Sammy Smith, but will they? I don't know. I guess we'll find out tomorrow, but we'll see.
Well, if it's anything like the Bubba Wallace penalty after Chicago last year, if they listen to all the social media outrage from the bots, they'll probably fashion some sort of penalty up for him. But he also drives Junior's car, so that's another wrinkle in this matter.
Yeah, the bots on Twitter. That's the ones that know everything. But there you go. All right.
Yeah, precisely.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, it's a tale as old as time, and we could continue going on here. We're already half an hour into the show here. Let's talk about Austin Hill, because there was a winner in all of this, believe it or not. Seemingly coming out of nowhere. What was he, 4th, 5th, 6th place there on the last lap, and it was like the seas parted for him. Maybe he played a role in parting those seas for himself. You can go back and be the judge for yourself here, but he does win the race. He seems to have a knack for winning these. When we say it, like, all that for an Austin Hill win, it reminds me of Joey Logano sometimes in the Cup Series. Like, of course, after all that happened, it would be that 21 car emerging victorious. And of course, Sheldon Creed, how many second place finishes is he up to now? I mean, my goodness, what does he have to do to win a race? It's reminding me a lot of Daniel Hemric, and we'll get into Hemric here a little bit later as well with what happened in the truck race. But, Tanner, obviously a familiar one too. As you mentioned, these guys used to be teammates. They have a history at this track. And this time it worked out for them in the results here. What's your reaction to Austin Hill stealing another win here, and then Sheldon Creed continuing to extend that record for most seconds without a win in this series?
Well, if we're talking about people that should have been penalized in race, Austin Hill is absolutely on the list for what he did to Jesse Love through 2 other cars. So essentially what Austin Hill did with I think it was about 20 to go, he got mildly bumped in turn 3 by Christian Eckes, who was clearly faster at the time. And Eckes got about 3 car lengths on him going into turn 1. Well, Austin Hill thought it'd be a good idea to work on his table pool playing skills, line his car up like a cue ball and shoot through 2 cars and wreck his own teammate. So essentially he hit Christian Eckes, who was behind Carson Kvapil, and Carson Kvapil got spun out through Eckes, through Hill. And then as Carson Kvapil's car was starting to go sideways, Jesse Love was ahead of him entering the corner and also got taken out. So, yeah, and the whole incident effectively led to Jesse Love, who moments before got on the radio saying we have a car very capable of winning this race, and he gets wiped out and his radiator busted and gets completely taken out. And I would have penalized him for 2 laps. He wouldn't have even been part of this finish, because you can't do that. Like, for as ridiculous as Sammy's move was at the end of the race, Austin Hill's was debatably worse for 7th place. So I don't feel like he earned this win in any way. I feel like the way he races in general is supremely cowardly and very, very self-motivated. He does not care about anybody else on the racetrack. And, some people like that kind of a driver. Me personally, if I was in officiating, he would probably not even be in the Xfinity Series for all the Busch League crap that he pulls. So, yeah, it's really disappointing to see a guy who kind of set everything in motion for this finish to happen get rewarded for it. And I hate that the Xfinity Series ends races this way. And I think that they could, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, I think that the Xfinity Series field could take a page out of the Truck Series playbook and maybe race a little bit cleaner and with a little bit more respect going forward, because good Lord, just the amount of cautions that we saw in the Xfinity Series race was just profoundly disappointing for a 250 lap endeavor.
Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and flip the bullet points here. I've got my outline, and we can use this as a nice transition here. We'll get into Daniel Hemric, the race winner, in just a moment. But race ended in regulation once again. I mean, how many races are we up to now on this streak for the Truck Series? It's been quite something.
18?
Yeah, something like that. It's getting close to the all-time record, which is, I mean, if you think back to Phoenix in 23, is just borderline unfathomable. But that's the reality. Like you said, is it now? And I don't know if it's driver specific. Like some of these truckers have moved up to the Xfinity Series and brought that mentality with them, and some of these guys now are, maybe there's more veteran leadership in the truck garage. I don't know what it is, but is it a bigger issue now in the Xfinity Series, like you were mentioning, than it is in the trucks, which was notorious for a lack of respect for so many years?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a symptom of the system that we have with trucks being a ladder up to Xfinity. Well, naturally, if the more aggressive drivers of the Truck Series inevitably move up because of talent or having a big enough wallet, they're going to bring those same issues more than likely over to the Xfinity Series when they move up. And a perfect example of this is Noah Gragson, who still doesn't have his head on straight, and he's in Cup now. So it's not something that has a complete and clear symptom that you can poke at and say, hey, we have to stop doing this so we can prevent this from happening. It's one of those things where I think it's more individualized with each driver. And I just feel like before, when drivers like Hamlin, Harvick to an extent, and granted he had his own rough streak of his own coming into Cup and would occasionally revisit said rough streak as time would go on, but eventually he became a respectable driver and didn't invite contact as often as he did when he was younger. But at a time where guys like Hamlin were coming up, the guys in the lower series would rough you up if you rough them up. And I just feel like nowadays the truck and Xfinity lifers are just not really willing to get the elbows out if it's going to mean compromising their finish or compromising the integrity of their car. And I feel like the conduct amongst the drivers is worse because of it. And that's a real shame, because I think we've all lamented how the Cup platform isn't as good as the Xfinity platform in terms of the style of car. So the Xfinity Series traditionally puts on a really good show at a number of different racetracks because of how hard the cars are to handle. And I just feel like if guys like Justin Allgaier, I'm only looking at the truck results, but guys like Allgaier, guys like Brandon Jones, even, God forbid, if guys like that would have a little bit more initiative to take their roles as mentors to an extent seriously, we would have less of these problems as they get up to Cup, or less problems as they exist in the series themselves. Obviously, Matt Crafton has ham-fistedly tried to go about being an enforcer in his series, and that has not worked out for him at all. And frankly, I hope it continues to not work out for him. But someone like Ben Rhodes, who has been in the series for a decade now, he is not afraid to get into these guys and not afraid to set the record straight with them. And I think that's a good thing, even if I don't like how he goes about it all the time. The problem is that the only way to really set these guys straight is to wreck them back more often than not. And they don't listen to reason. So it's not always a productive conversation you're going to have. And unfortunately, you will, in your attempts to talk these guys out of being so aggressive and stop being so ridiculous with how they conduct themselves, unfortunately, you're going to run into the Noah Gragsons of the world who just don't care. Like they go out there with a singular mindset of I'm going to win at all costs, and unfortunately, a lot of times the costs come with how you race. And unfortunately, they're not really picking up the tab in terms of retribution, and they think they can just race everybody that way, and that's kind of why we're at the moment we're at. And it would just be nice to see some of these lower series guys that have a bit more tenure in their respective series dole out a little bit more punishment and try to have like constructive conversations with these younger guys. And I think ultimately that would lead to a better foot forward. And maybe those conversations are happening in the truck series, so those younger drivers aren't getting into as many incidents. But I don't know. It just seems like something's broken in Xfinity that needs to be repaired. But the trucks seem to have it figured out now, and I don't know why that is. It doesn't. You would think that more young guys are coming in more aggressively, like some of the guys that just left, but that's not really the case. And I'm wondering why that is. Have you like really thought about it as far as like why this seems to be such an issue for Xfinity, but not so much for trucks this year?
I don't know. It's one of the great mysteries to me in our sport right now. Because I think, again, and I don't know if it's just like insane luck with the timing, because I mean, goodness knows there were certainly some ruffled feathers during the truck series race as well. I think Corey Heim wasn't too happy. He had another dominant truck and was able to rebound back up to a 6th place finish. But we had Ty Majeski and where did Caden Honeycutt end up?
He was wrecked, so he wasn't coming back.
That was really unfortunate because he could have won the race as well. That would have been a great story for him. But
I felt that was incidental contact, if anything. Sure.
But yeah, I didn't think. Yeah,
it was unfortunate.
yeah, certainly. Yeah, but again, even like when it happens in trucks, I don't feel like it's been more incidental, like you were saying, or it's not as blatant, or we're not seeing it on the last lap with guys just with 5 to go or less, whatever would trigger an overtime restart. I don't know. I mean, you would have to think that like at some point it's going to rear its ugly head again, and somebody's going to drive over their head, and we're going to have this streak come to an end here. But I mean, this is a series that is back up to 25 races this year, but you're talking like 18, 19, 20 races. You're almost at a full calendar year, full truck series season since we went into overtime, which for this series again is just borderline unfathomable. Even in Cup last year, I feel like I saw graphics on NBC last year, like this is a record for most overtime finishes in a single season in 2024 in the Cup series. And again, maybe that's due to the drivers of Xfinity and trucks from recent years now being up in the Cup series and the driving standards being brought with them for better or worse. I don't know, but I do agree that it does somehow, even though, and I'd never have wanted to fully place trucks as a stage as a rung on the development ladder, because I do feel like, you see it in Xfinity as well with Allgaier, and Allmendinger's kind of been on the seesaw the last couple of years. He's back in Cup now, but he spent a couple of years full time in Xfinity. You see it there with those guys. Elliott Sadler, another one that went back there. But trucks, I felt like used to be a place for former Cup guys or lifers who never got a Cup opportunity, veterans of the sport. And it's become more developmental. But I don't know. I think that for a series that is technically third on the ladder as opposed to number 2 in Xfinity, to be able to do this better than them, and even to an extent, I think better than the Cup guys, to be fair. It's just, I'm not going to complain, but it does leave you scratching your head, like how, if these guys can figure it out, how can the Xfinity and Cup drivers not do the same?
I wish I had an answer. I really do.
Yeah. Well, we'll see we'll keep monitoring the streak here, see how long it goes. But it has been quite remarkable. Also, you mentioned Brandon Jones. I've got to admit, I kind of forgot how long. I mean, he's getting up there.
This is his 10th year.
10th year full time in the series since 2016 with RCR, and stops at Gibbs and Junior Motorsports, now back at Gibbs along the way. So he's getting up. I mean, he's only 28, but I guess when you come in at 18, which is the age minimum, then you do the math, that works out. So there's a lot to continue to digest there with those stats, but let's give Daniel Hemric his credit where it's due. Like I said, Hemric was kind of the Sheldon Creed of years past here with how many second place finishes he was racking up, and then he got his first win in the championship race, a one-time winner, one-time champion, if you will, at the end of 2021, and then had stops at colleague along the way, and has been in Cup, been in Xfinity, now back in the Truck Series with a very strong team, McAnally Hilgeman Racing, with what Christian Eckes did in that truck last year. We knew he was going to have the equipment and the resources around him to break into victory lane, and now he has done it. What's your reaction to Daniel Hemric and seeing the backflip again? I think Carl Edwards fans in particular maybe missed that. Maybe they've been pulling for Daniel Hemric to be able to give them that the last couple of years. We haven't seen that too much, but he gave us one Friday night.
He was my shining moment yesterday at the end of our post-race show. And as someone that came into the season thinking that he would win multiple races, it was a great start to the season for him in my mind. So I think that Hemric coming to this truck was just an excellent career decision for him. I think that his best opportunities in both of the higher divisions coming into this year were probably behind him, unfortunately. So being able to hop into a championship 4-level truck in the Truck Series was absolutely a home run hit for him and his agent. So my hat's off to Hemric. He took advantage of a great situation that happened in front of him with the leaders taking each other out. And he was consistently in the mix the entire race. And to have the discipline there at the end to not only not get into the truck ahead of him, but to race Ankrum completely and holistically clean. It was really nice to see. It was very refreshing. And this is the kind of reputation that he's built for himself, I think, even though he does come from the same waters that Dale Earnhardt came from in Kannapolis, North Carolina. He is still making an identity for himself that I think should be more respected than it is. I know that it's become kind of a meme that he doesn't win, but the guy is a very talented race car driver. And just because he doesn't have the win column totals to help tout that fact doesn't make him any less of a driver. The guy would have won the 2018 Xfinity Series title on points if we still did things that way without winning. And I think given the field that they had that year with the big three that ended up being the next year with Reddick, Custer, Bell, I find that very impressive. And I don't know, it's definitely seeming like this will be something that'll spur Daniel Hemric forward this year. The last time that he won a race, he did it at the end of a year with a team that he was leaving. So he didn't really have the opportunity to really build off the momentum that came with that win at Phoenix in 2021. And I think that now that he's won relatively early in the season, it'll give him and that 19 team an opportunity to regroup, use that momentum going forward, and hopefully translate it into more trips to victory lane. Because for as good as Christian Eckes and Charles Denick are, I'm sure that there are plenty of talented men and women that still work over there at MHR, and I can't imagine that this will be their last trip to victory lane this season, not just with Daniel Hemric, but Tyler Ankrum. He's looked very strong as well. And I mean, the 91 truck, he's there. That's really all I got to say about that.
Yeah. Well, and Tyler Ankrum is a Truck Series winner as well. I mean, I think people might
Yes.
forget that because it was pre-pandemic the last time he won. But obviously him getting the runner-up finish here, I wouldn't be surprised if at 18 parks in victory lane at some point this year as well. And I like what you said about Hemric also. He I think did it pretty much everything but win a race when he was at RCR and early in his Xfinity career. Although I will remind you, there was another driver who drove for RCR who did win a championship in a straight up points format that didn't win a race. I don't know if we need to revisit that.
We have maybe alluded to this person once or twice tonight. So
Yes.
fill in the blanks.
if you ever feel bad about yourself, I bought Austin Dillon's truck and Nationwide at the time championship winning diecast because when he was coming up through the ranks, I really believed at the time that he might be the first ever Triple Crown champion, if you will, to win titles in all three series. And I wanted to have those diecasts as I was building stock, so to speak, in case that ever happened. Never say never with the insanity of this format in 2025, but I don't think I have to worry about that with the current state of RCR. And I don't know, Austin Dillon's already in his mid-30s. I think that's probably not going to happen at this point. That might be one of my all-time worst takes. So we can be honest about that.
Sailed.
Yeah.
Likely sailed.
Think we're good there.
Yeah, probably so. Probably.
All right. Let's move on here. Let's close the show tonight with an open segment or open segments, I guess I should say. Well, we're getting to a few topics here. First, Tanner, I'm going to throw a curveball at you here. This actually isn't on the. Well, before we do that, want to circle back to the chat here. I apologize to Denver. We were deep in our discussion here. Didn't have time to read his comment here on driving standards in Xfinity and trucks, but he says they should have a driver's standards advisor with an iron fist mentality to call in-race penalties on the spot to curb these wayward drivers. I like the idea, but I fear that, sometimes, I would want that person to be vetted and know what they're talking about, because I think sometimes we see the opposite extreme. I'm thinking mostly of Formula One here with these ticky-tack 5 and 10-second penalties that are handed out sometimes, and that creates more consistent inconsistencies over there. So, I tend to agree, but I also think be careful what you wish for in many respects. I think we need to do something, but I don't know. I do have concerns about where that could go as well. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I do, and here's my problem with iron. It is gray, and that's the problem actually with the NASCAR rule book. It's too gray. It's written in gray crayon, and I said this as much in our Slack chat on Saturday night. You don't even have to rule with an iron fist. You need to rule with the strongest, blackest pen. If you just have somebody create the rule book with any sort of forethought in mind, these kind of things can be legislated very easily, very quickly, very efficiently. This doesn't have to be a hand-wringing contest every single week, which is what it's turning into. Oh, well, he right-hooked a guy after driving across several lanes, but it was at a road course at a low-speed section on the track. It's like, no, he right-hooked somebody. You already set a precedent. Just suspend him. It's a lot easier to do, and it's a lot easier for them to. It's a lot harder for them to appeal and get out of.
That's exactly it.
So yeah, with this kind of incident, I don't even think having another person that you hire to be in the officiating booth for each race is all that necessary. I mean, I think that the presence of that kind of person might be nice, and it would definitely give those younger drivers the ability to speak to one person directly and be like, hey, if someone did this, what would your reaction be? But then that also leads to, well, you're only giving one person the sole discretion of making a decision. I don't like that either. So I think that in theory, I kind of agree with you. It sounds nice, but I think at the end of the day, if NASCAR just had a bit more of a comprehensive and more well thought out rule book that wasn't written in crayon, then we'd probably be in a better place where we don't even have to have these silly conversations.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that I like your analogy about iron being gray and the ink in a pen being black. I think that's if you make it a black and white sort of deal, right rear hook's going to get you a one race suspension. That's the precedent that we're setting. First of all, I don't think Austin Cindric could really argue that very much at COTA. I don't know how far that appeal would go, but it would, I think, close the door on that controversy, because at least you would say, well, circumstances aside, that's the precedent that's been set. They're going to honor that, and I think you've got to respect that.
Let's say I had a reputable source that told me that David Reagan and Harrison Burton were both getting their seats fitted for the 2 car for Phoenix, and thankfully for them, they didn't have to show up for Sunday. So, it seemed like Team Penske was ready for a suspension to be handed down. But again, when you write the gray into the rule book with the Hamlin-Dillon incident from Richmond last year, where you had a very clear path to suspension for Dillon for what he did, and then you don't suspend him because, it's at a short track, the speeds weren't too fast. Like, it's those gray area decisions that make all of this conversation completely unnecessary, because all you had to do is just be like, nope, you broke the clear rule that we have, the one aggressive driving penalty we do have. You broke it. You know what the result's going to be. It happened each of the last 2 years, and we suspended guys. It should be that easy, and unfortunately, they have made it painfully difficult anytime these kind of discussions have to happen, because I think the fans and most of the drivers seem to want something completely different than what NASCAR is willing to offer.
Wouldn't that have been something? David Reagan in a Team Penske car, that would have been
in the 2 car.
Yeah, that would have a hard time just picturing that. I guess probably his last start would have been the Stage 60 race that he did Daytona 500 last year. I don't know off the top of my head if he got in that car a second time last year. I know they brought that car out again, but I think that's his last start. So it's been a little bit over a year since we saw him. I know he's mostly retired at this point, but
he's doing real force testing, and he is like patient zero for the hydrogen-based car. So
there you go. Yeah, certainly no shortage of experience if they've gone down that path there. This is the curveball I was talking about, Tanner. I've got one more question for you on Martinsville, and then we can move on here. Matthew Owens, behind the mic, if you ever see him in chat here, a friend of the show.
Yep.
He tweeted something at the start of this week. He said, you will never convince me that Xfinity truck or modified winners should get a grandfather clock for winning at Martinsville. It's like giving the winner of the 300 at Daytona the Harley J. Earl Trophy, or getting a spot on the Borg Warner for winning the Freedom 100. And then he sent me his own tweet and said, nobody will change my mind on this. I responded saying, I think it's all right. Martinsville doesn't really have a crown jewel race on its own. It's got 2 spots on the Cup schedule. The Harley J. Earl and Borg Warner are synonymous with their respective races, whereas the clock is synonymous with the track itself. Maybe you could argue they should get a smaller grandfather clock. I don't know if you want to get into scaling right there. I think that's kind of getting into semantics. But Tanner, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have an issue with a young 18-year-old Truck Series driver getting the same trophy at Martinsville that an established Cup veteran like Denny Hamlin would receive for winning a Cup race?
Matthew, do you want to give them a great uncle clock? Like, what do you want to do? It's semantics. This is a silly thing this is a very silly hill to die on, in my opinion. I think that, to your point, the grandfather clock is more representative of the area, the facility itself, rather than the individual race series that go there. And I'm going to be completely honest. I think winning at Martinsville takes an extreme amount of discipline, patience, and speed, obviously, unless you're Austin Hill. So I think that honoring that effort with the thing that you give the Cup winner, maybe there is a bit of an incongruity there, and maybe you could scale the trophies or something goofy like that. But what would be the point? The whole point is to shine a light on the company that makes the grandfather clock trophies for the winners of the race. And at the end of the day, why do we care? Why is this a hill that we're dying on? I think comparing Martinsville, which we race at in the Cup Series twice a year, to the Indianapolis 500 is a bit extreme. is scaling up the equivalency quite a bit. So yeah, and
Well, Amber's got a solution here. Cuckoo clock
cuckoo clock.
Xfinity.
Oh,
Might be fitting after the
a lot
weekend
of
we
bird
just
brain
had here.
behavior down there, so maybe so.
Yeah. Well, I kind of see it as like the monster at Dover or the lobster at New Hampshire. You know, I think there are certain trophies that you identify with the track, and so and I think Dover even does that to an extent. I think I know Truck Series hasn't gone there in several years, but the lower series like ARCA East, you're not going to put the die cast in the hand of Miles the Monster, but for the Cup Series they do that. Maybe but that's because that's the top level and the trophies are scaled for size there, which again, I think you're just kind of getting into semantics at this point, but I think that's more the category that the grandfather clock falls into at Martinsville. I think when you talk about, the summer winner at Daytona, the Coke Zero 400, Firecracker 400 winner, they don't get the Harley J. Earl trophy there either. The winner of the IMS Grand Prix doesn't get their face on the Borg Warner trophy at Indianapolis. I think those trophies belong to those races and the prestige that goes with that, more so than the track itself, which I think is the case of the grandfather clock. So again, Matthew was texting me this morning saying like, hey, it should be a fun show tonight, with all the stuff you got to talk about in Xfinity. And I don't know if he's I welcome him if he's in the chat right now to offer a response, or maybe he'll see this after the fact. But appreciate the support of one of our regulars, and thought we'd touch on that here before we move on. So the big news of the day, we have a commissioner now in the sport that doesn't want to be like the NBA or make comparisons to other stick and ball sports. And a few weeks after those comments come out, here we are. All of a sudden, Steve Phelps is now the commissioner of NASCAR. That opens up the role of president for Steve O'Donnell, who becomes the 6th president of NASCAR in its history, if I recall correctly. The Francis, Mike Helton, Brent Dewar, Steve Phelps, and now Steve O'Donnell. So, Tanner, I know you and I were very like-minded on this a few weeks ago when Christopher Yates' comments came up. What's your reaction to this news here that there's now a commissioner of NASCAR, and it's our friend Steve Phelps?
April Fools came early, everybody.
Yeah.
So
early here.
Yeah, just a couple hours, but yeah, it definitely came a little early for this high key joke to come in. So it's so funny how 2 weeks ago we get this farce of an appeal, this counterclaim that NASCAR filed against 2311 and Front Row and Curtis Polk in particular. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that they singled an owner out of 2311 Racing, which seems like a clerical error in my opinion, but I won't go too deep into that. Yeah, it's just so rich when you have your main attorney going out on the soapbox for you on Sirius and being like, yeah, these guys want it to be like the NBA and the NFL, and we're not like that. That's just not how we do things here. And then the very first second that they get a chance to do something to prove us wrong, they go out and make a new position that doesn't even follow the same parameters of a commissioner for any of those other leagues. So let me just break down what a commissioner actually does in the NFL and NBA. The commissioner of those leagues is an elected representative by the board of governors. Now, I know that might seem like something NASCAR can do, but what the board of governors are in each of those respective leagues that I mentioned is that those leagues are owned by the owners of each of the teams. So when they elect a representative for them, it's to act upon their will. So in essence, Roger Goodell acts at the will and testament of the owners of the 32 owners of the NFL, and Adam Silver for the 30 owners of the NBA. What about the next gen platform, anything that NASCAR does, what about any of that works in favor of the teams? I can tell you, it's none. It's hardly any at all. So this whole thing is a farce. I think that they're scared. I think they're very clearly scared of the very real threat that the teams pose to kicking them out of the league entirely. And they're responding to it, and they're doing it in the worst ways possible. They are trying to file motions to get court cases thrown out that they are not winning at any point, and then they're filing counterclaims and then completely contradicting said counterclaims and the basis for them less than a fortnight later. It's just what you've come to expect with the NASCAR leadership since the charter negotiations came about. I think they saw Jeffrey Kessler involved in any of this and immediately started wetting themselves. So, yeah, it's pretty embarrassing because Steve Phelps' role doesn't change at all. This is all just figurehead nonsense, and it'll be really interesting to see how 2311's recent motion to dismiss the countersuit goes, because I think that this may have just lost NASCAR that bit of the case, and it certainly will not help them when we go into court in December. So good luck, NASCAR. It's not looking great for you, and I think you know that. So happy April Fool's Day to you guys.
Well, I've got to say, I love the Sports Business Journal article from Adam Stern. Literally says, this is a direct quote, "For Phelps, the move will allow him to take a more big picture role at NASCAR and optically be on a more level playing field with stick and ball leaders like NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell and NBA Commissioner Adam Silver." You can't write this stuff.
Well, he did, but yeah.
The irony is too beautiful, and we'll leave it there. Again, I'm with you, Tanner. I don't know how much is going to come out of this beyond just a reorganization of the suits and executive roles here, but it is news. I thought we'd touch on it in light of our comments from the show a few weeks back when these comparisons were first made. Not doing anything to help their cause here with the news that we got here today. So we'll just leave it there. One final thing I wanted to bring up, and then we'll move on here. Tanner, I know you had mentioned this in getting ready for the show tonight. Obviously, I know I was on Wrap Up the last couple of weeks. It's not a show that I am on as much anymore, although I do fill in from time to time. But I will comment on the Cup race a little bit here. Denny Hamlin and Progressive, that new partnership starting off with a bang here. Denny getting one of the most impressive wins, maybe not all throughout his career. I would say 55 of them. You certainly have a lot to pick and choose from there. But certainly in recent times, it's been almost a full calendar year since he won a Cup Series race, and doing so in dominant fashion at what I guess is probably his second home track in Virginia at Martinsville. Denny Hamlin's 44 years old, and I saw some chatter on social media that we've seen drivers kind of hit their primes in their early 30s. By the time they get into their or late 30s, rather, I should say, by the time they get into their early to mid 40s, we sometimes see a decline in driver performance. Some were surprised that Denny Hamlin looks this competitive as he enters his mid 40s at 44 years old. Tanner, you said you were not surprised by what you saw on Sunday. Why is that?
I think that driver ages have been widely been pushed out to the forefront as a reason for a driver's decline. And while obviously there are some biological factors that do line up with aging and things like that, and how acute you are at making decisions and reaction time and things like that, Kevin Harvick won 9 races when he was 44 years old 5 years ago. How quickly we forget. Yes, you could look back at someone like Jimmy Johnson, who sharply declined around age 41, 42. But I think that the other aspects of each driver's individual situations also should come into the purview of analysis. So let me break it down in a very quick way. Jimmy Johnson came into the 2018 season with the pointy nose Camaro, which was objectively terrible, and only 2 drivers won races that year in that car, Chase Elliott and Austin Dillon. And we all know how he won his one race. With that pointy nose is a very
pointy nose
strong
came in handy, I
feature.
was going to say, yeah.
Now, Not only that, he came into that season with 3 teammates that had not won a single Cup Series race, or in the case of William Byron, hadn't won one at all, or hadn't even run one at any point. So when you lean on Jeff Gordon, Dale Jr., Casey Kane as your nucleus, there's still at least a little bit of speed you can eke out of that. But when you're trying to bring 3 other children up to speed, you're going to have a bad time as the lone veteran of the team. Add on to that the fact that his relationship with Chad Knaus deteriorated at the time. That's not going to help. Plus, there was also a reduction of horsepower around that same time, and they were playing with downforce packages and things like that. That's not going to help a guy that's that age, more often than not, given the other circumstances. With Kevin Harvick, his decline in 2023 was greatly exaggerated. He was still strong at a number of the tracks that he was typically strong at. He was going to win the Spring Phoenix race that year if Harrison Burton doesn't spin out. He had an 8-second lead. I know this because I was there. His teammates at the time, the only one of them that had won in 2020, one prior to 2023 was Chase Briscoe at Phoenix the previous year. The other 2 came in relatively inexperienced and unsuccessful in their attempts in Cup. On top of that, SHR as an organization fell off after Harvick's monumental 2020 season, as we saw. Martin Truex Jr., his decline, a lot of people point to age. Don't really know why. Do we all forget collectively that JGR went the last 18 events last year without winning? That Denny Hamlin came into this weekend with a 31 race winless streak? I didn't forget that. So, yeah. On top of that, Truex spent the last year of his career learning a brand new model of car. They changed the Camry body from 23 to 24, where 23 he had won 3 races and was the regular season champion. He comes into the next season with a brand new car in his what ended up being his last year. Again, age is not the sole determining factor of a driver's decline, and I'm really getting tired of this conversation of, he's over 40, so the cliff's coming. It's like, that's just not how auto racing works, and if it was, then Fernando Alonso would not be in F1 right now at his advanced age. Has anyone even raced at F1 at his age prior to him? Not anybody in my lifetime that I can remember.
Yeah, the Fangios of the world way back when, but in modern time, it's unusual what he's doing for sure.
Yeah, it's a young man's game in F1, usually, and yet he still has a seat on the grid. Lewis Hamilton's 40, he still has a seat on the grid, just got debatably a promotion of sorts going to Ferrari from Mercedes after they're languishing the past couple of years. So yeah, age is not the sole determining factor of a driver's decline. There are a number of factors that go into this that create a lot of nuance in each situation. Denny Hamlin, if you look at his situation right now, yeah, he has a new crew chief, but that crew chief is not a new crew chief like Ty Gibbs' crew chief. Chris Gale has experience, has won at the Cup level a couple of times. He mentioned coming into this season that it was actually great to not be halfway mentoring a driver going into a season, trying to get them up to speed, trying to, ease them into telling them, what they need to do to the car to adjust it to their specifications. And you combine that with Chris Gabehart, his old crew chief, moving up to comp director. There's going to be some time there where everything coalesces, everything takes time to really gel when you take on that new role. So this was the first weekend we saw Gibbs have 4 pretty solid race cars for the first time all season, and I'm sure it won't be the last. You also have to consider that his 2 teammates in Chase Briscoe, who he's coming into a team that has tenure, has been together for a long time. He inherits that after having won a race last year, has playoff experience, has gone deep in the playoffs, is 30 years old. You have Christopher Bell, 32, is really coming into his own this season. would have won yesterday more than likely if Hamlin wasn't in the field for his 4th win in 7 races. I mean, everything around Hamlin compared to the 3 situations that I just mentioned to you outside of Truex are all a more formidable position than any of Johnson's, Harvick's, or really anybody else that you can think of that had a decline because they aged. So, yeah, for me, it's just a tiring conversation, which is kind of coincidental seeing as we're talking about age. And I'm just really getting at my wit's end with it. I think that we need to have a bit more of a nuanced discussion about when a driver starts to decline rather than just being like, oh, well, he's 44. It feels rather lazy. It feels undercooked. It needs more analysis when these kind of things happen. And I'm hoping that us talking about it here can help spread that dialogue a little bit more, because between you and me, I think Denny Hamlin's got 4 or 5 years left in him. The way he prepares, the way he, goes about building his team. I don't see a path for him leaving the sport anytime soon. So I think that hopefully with Hamlin continuing to have success at his advanced age, that we can move on from this part of the discussion when drivers age, that they just suddenly get worse. I don't think that's always the case.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I think Jeff Gordon comes to mind as somebody who stepped away in his mid-40s, but he had back issues for many years. I mean, there was a number of contributing factors, as if Gordon had anything to prove as well. Not even a first ballot. I say don't even need a ballot Hall of Famer. I think certainly earned the right to step away whenever he felt the time was right. But if you want to go down the Hendrick path as well, Mark Martin was winning Cup races at age 50, nearly won a championship in 2009. Ron Hornaday, if it weren't for Kyle Busch at Texas in 2011, maybe could have won a Truck Series championship at 53. So, it is not unprecedented by any stretch of the imagination in NASCAR for drivers to remain competitive through their mid-40s, late 40s, and even in some cases into their early 50s here. I do think there is something to be said, and I think Kevin Harvick's mentioned this as well, about drivers being under more stress from the chaos of the playoff format, and maybe that would lead them to say, I've had enough a little bit sooner. But I think that would be exhaustion from the system. Maybe we saw that with Carl Edwards, and of course, Carl stepped away much sooner than I think he needed to or was expected to for personal reasons, and not judging him at all. I think if you want to hear his story, I think the Dale Jr. Download episode that he just did was absolutely fantastic. Highly recommend it. But I think when you look at any driver stepping away from this sport, or this series rather, I think there's always a number of contributing factors, and age might play a role sometimes, but I don't think, like you said, Tanner, I don't think it's something where you could say like he reached the magic number of 40 or 44 or 48 or whatever. So now we're going to see a sharp decline. I think this is a sport where you see it much more on a case-by-case basis. And I think we have to take that into consideration when looking at how much longer a driver might have. Because I'm with you. I think, maybe Denny will win a championship and decide, if I'm going out on top, I've had enough, and step away at the end of this year. I don't know. Who could have predicted Carl Edwards would have stepped away when he did? And he's got the business side of things all set for him with not just owning a team, but now trying to break into the media world as well with his podcast and everything. I don't think anybody would judge him if he walked away, but I also don't think anybody would judge him if he decided I can do this for another 3 to 5 more years, because as we saw this weekend, there's nothing that suggests to me that any sort of decline like that is imminent, at least any time in the near future. So we'll keep an eye on that as the season goes on. But I tend to agree with you. I think the age discussion deserves more nuance than that.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add in was that compared to Carl, I think that the championship trophy for Denny Hamlin speaks to him like the Green Goblin mask speaks to Norman Osborn.
Sure.
I think that it's just something that Denny needs to have to feel whole. And I think he's going to continue to try until he physically can't.
Yeah. And I was going to say maybe Mark Martin would be the same way, but I think, watching Slapshoe Series, I think he said like 2009, at least for him as a fan, was the least painful out of all of his runner-ups, because it was like, we just wanted to win one more race, and we got so much more than that. Everything else was just gravy at that point. But, again, Mark continued into his early 50s trying to get that elusive championship, and maybe Daniel will do the same. Maybe Daniel will get it this year and decide he's had enough, or maybe he'll win it this year and keep racing anyway. We'll just have to wait and see. But I don't think it's a lack of ability. If he were to step away sooner than we expect, I think he could do this for another, like you said, Tanner, 3 to 5 years at least. So we'll see if he does.
Yeah, I think that with Mark, it was like, well, if I get into a Hemric car, maybe I can contend with Jimmy. But with all due respect to Mark, if Jeff wasn't going to win a title by being Jimmy's teammate, then he sure as heck wasn't either.
I mean, Jimmy was unstoppable during that run. And again, I think with the format that we have, the only way I could see someone winning 5 straight again is if Homestead becomes the finale and Kyle Larson makes the championship for 5 years in a row. Maybe then we would get a 5-time champion repeating. But even then, I think there's too many contributing factors that go into just a one-race finale that I don't know if we'll ever see a 7-time champ again. I don't think there's any way we'll see
this format.
A 5-time. Yeah, unless they change the format. Anybody winning 5 straight, I think, is going to be virtually impossible. So we'll leave it there. Thank you all so much for watching tonight's episode. And before we go into the closing, Tanner, I know I think you said you gave Hemric your one shining moment on last night's show, but was there anything else that stood out to you from this weekend? I know Xfinity probably didn't give you too much to choose from, but what else did you see this weekend that you want to highlight here as we close out tonight?
So it's not something necessarily that I've seen from this weekend, but I think it is important when you have a platform to shine your light on people that don't get it shined on them very much. So I would like to extend my shining light this weekend to trans racing fans and just trans people everywhere. I know that this sport does not always value your voice, your money, your presence at all. But let me just tell you, as somebody that does have a platform and does care very much about the welfare of this sport and just the welfare of trans people in general, that I value you. I think I could speak for most people, if not everybody here at Grid Network, that we value you. And on this Trans Day of Visibility, we recognize that it's really not easy to come out, especially being trans and completely changing a lot of the aspects of your day-to-day life to be who you really are. And I think that given today's significance and everything going on in the world, specifically in our home country of America, that I feel that trans racing fans, especially considering the Circuit of the Americas Invocation that happened earlier this month, that it's important to shine a light on the more vulnerable people that are in our fan base. So trans racing fans, this one's for you today.
All right. Thank you for that, Tanner. I will say, going back to the truck series here, I know you gave yours to Daniel Hemric yesterday. I want to shine some light on Tyler Ankrum as well. Again, a driver that I think has not gotten enough credit since he made this move to McAnally Hilgeman. But, like we talked about during that segment, I think certainly in a position to get that first win in a while. He did get that victory with David Gilliland's team in 2019. But as I saw, I think it was Daniel McFadden saying it this weekend, you have to go back pre-pandemic for the last time he parked it in victory lane in the series. I know he's hungrier than ever for a win. If he keeps racing like this, if MHR keeps building trucks like this, as we saw with 1-2 finish this weekend, you've got to think that victory will come sooner rather than later. So one shining moment to everybody at MHR, really, and a great result for that team, but to Tyler in particular. I imagine this was a weight off Daniel Hemric's shoulders, and I imagine that for Tyler Ankrum as an individual, that will come for him as well later this season if they keep doing what they're doing. So well done to them. That's going to be my one shining moment for this evening's show. And thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. Be sure to follow us on all our social media accounts here, X/Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, whatever microblogging platform you're using these days. We are on all 3. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, and most importantly, as most of you are watching us right now, subscribe to us right here on our YouTube channel and visit our website. As I mentioned at the start of tonight's show, we've just gone and relaunched that, and we'll be highlighting different portions of that site every day this week as we approach week 1 of the grid ranking being released this weekend. So visit gridnetworktv.com to check that out, and be on the lookout for the grid ranking this weekend after the conclusion of all the races that are coming up here in just a few days' time. Now, like I said at the start of the show, if you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take a few minutes afterwards to consider investing in our Patreon, joining Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in helping expand our coverage like we've just done through the website here through the rest of 2025 and beyond. You can also become a YouTube member through the Grid Network channel, or if you'd rather make a one-time contribution instead, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below, or tip us on YouTube through Super Chat, or if you're watching the stream afterwards or watching one of our highlights, you can use the super thanks feature as well. Any amount will help us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet, and we really do appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. So thank you all very much for those who have helped us continue to build what we're trying to build here at Grid Network. Now, on Wednesday, don't miss Grid Tonight with Kobe Lambeth, Josh Birch, and Matt White. They'll bring you all the latest news from around the world in the world of motorsports. Our new pre-race show format for NASCAR continues on Thursday. We have not forgotten about women in motorsports. It just didn't work out for a recording session this week between all 4 of us having different things going on. And like I mentioned, I'll be out of commission this weekend for my sister's wedding. So maybe that show will happen with or without me, but we will recap F1 Academy at some point. Isha Bourgeois actually wrote a follow-up piece for the website recapping the opening round of F1 Academy. So make sure you check that out if you want to get caught up on that series. And of course, wrap-up will follow on Sunday, and then we'll be back in 1 week's time here on Encore. Brandon Crossman will be back as well. So make sure you all tune in for that. Tanner, any other final thoughts before we sign off for the evening?
Nope. Let's just hope next week presents less controversy.
I think that's a sentiment that can be agreed upon within the majority of the fan base here. I will only say I understand that the teams wanted continuity. I saw this come up this weekend, but can we at least move the numbers back for throwback weekend? I'd like seeing all these teams come out. I think there's been a lot of great reveals, particularly with the smaller teams. I know people were saying sometimes the smaller sponsors are willing to play into the throwbacks a little bit more. A lot of the schemes look great. They would look even better if we move the number back to the center of the door. Contingency space, whatever, you can have it for 35 or 36 weekends. If we're going to continue to do throwback weekend at Darlington, please just let the move them back people have this one particular race weekend, and let the schemes look like even closer to the exact match from whatever they're throwing it back to. I think that would put a smile on a lot of people's faces. So obviously not going to happen this year. We'll see it at least in the Xfinity Series, but maybe we can at least reach a compromise there going forward. For Tanner Smith, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned for the rest of our programming as well. Have a good rest of your week, everybody.